Dark energies doesn't grow through truth. They grow through attention, and they gain momentum when people hand over their focus, their reverence, their fear, or even their curiosity. That's why the most dangerous forces on this earth aren't always the loudest. They're the ones that demand devotion, the ones that tell you, bow to me, right? Not in those exact words, but basically that's what they demand. It could be a mentor, it could be a trainer, it can be a boss, right? It could be elders in a family, siblings, but they want you to bow to them. Now, anything that needs to be worshiped in order to function is already revealing its weakness. Divine power doesn't beg. Divine power doesn't manipulate. Divine power doesn't drain. It guides. It directs. It strengthens. But dark energy requires an audience, applause, someone or anyone to give them credit. Because without that, they collapse, they fade, they lose their hold. And that's why you must be cautious with any present person, movement, or spiritual path that wants your devotion more than your growth. Because anything that demands worship instead of offering you truth is not operating from the light, it's operating from dependency. And dependency always exposes their source because real power stands on its own. Dark power needs followers. So keep your spirits guarded. Not every call is meant to be answered. Not every presence deserves your attention. And not every guide is guiding you toward your purpose. Some are guiding you toward themselves because without your energy, they have nothing. Dark forces don't operate off divine breath. They operate off attention, submission, and emotional investment. They need eyes on them. They need engagement and they need a host. Why, you might ask? Because they don't create power, they consume it. Your reverence becomes their fuel. Your fear becomes their momentum. Your fixation becomes their access point. And this is why the enemy chases attention more than truth. He doesn't need your understanding, he needs your focus. And I am using he, but it is generalized. If he can get you to elevate him, even unintentionally, he gains a foothold. You ever know or heard of anyone that they always have to be worshiped or thanked or appreciated? You have to tell them all the time because they're individuals that cannot stand on their own. They're telling you, I need you to keep me alive. And anything that wants to be elevated above your spiritual compass is announcing its intent. That is the fundamental signature of darkness. Divine power stands firm with or without applause. Divine power doesn't chase followers. Divine power doesn't require a stage. But dark entities crumble without validation. They can't sustain themselves, so they pressure you to sustain them. Some do it through charm, some do it through fear, some do it through promises, some do it through emotional entanglement. But the core is the same. Give me your loyalty so I can survive. And this is why so many destructive forces disguise themselves as guides, mentors, lovers, leaders, influencers, or spiritual helpers. They survive through devotion. They maintain influence through submission. And without that, they fade. The demand for worship isn't a sign of superiority, it's a sign of dependency. Not every entity enters through ritual. Many enter through the openings people don't recognize. Are you lonely? Are you desiring to belong to around us? Be like us? You're curious what I do? You're curious? You're desperate. You don't have anyone. You're lonely. You've been hurt. You have emotional pain because they look for people who crave for meaning, the need for protection. Because devotion doesn't always look like kneeling. Sometimes devotion looks like obsession. Sometimes it looks like dependence. Sometimes it looks like fear you can't put down. Sometimes it looks like someone you feel compelled to please. When a force anchors itself using your emotions, it begins to feed. Your anxiety becomes a portal, your fixation becomes access, and your emotional responses become offerings. And slowly, you start feeling drained, pulled, thrown off balance, or even disconnected from your purpose. And that's not coincidence, that's consumption. Darkness doesn't only show up supernaturally, it shows up through people and systems that imitate the same pattern. Anything or anyone who wants absolute loyalty, unquestioned obedience, your identity, your will, your spiritual dependence, your emotional tethering, your reverence, and your commitment, even when it harms you, it breaks you, it keeps you from being financially stable. It is operating from the same blueprint. Look at movements that demand devotion. Look at partners who drain you unless you choose them. Look at groups that require your whole self just to stay in good standing. Look at leaders who punish independence. Look at organizations that call your separation rebellion. The pattern always repeats. Stay connected to me or you lose something. That is the calling card of dark governance. It's not empowerment, it's not mentorship, it is not spiritual growth. It is dependency based dominance. When you give devotion to anything outside the divine design, several things will begin to happen to you. Your spiritual vision begins to weaken. Your energy decreases. Your identity becomes confused. Your purpose is delayed. And your spiritual protection thins. You start missing signs, warnings, and inner direction because you are sustaining something that cannot sustain itself. So you begin to shape yourself around what you're serving because devotion creates a binding. You gave a seat of influence to something that never had the right to sit there. This is why dark energies do not simply want attention, they want commitment. Commitment gives them legal access to your spiritual realm. And once they have it, removing them requires intentional separation. The most powerful defense is discernment, because discernment comes from staying spiritually grounded, knowing who you belong to, knowing who you answer to, understanding the nature of divine power, recognizing emotional manipulation, and identifying pressure based on devotion. Ask yourself, does this force encourage my growth or demand my loyalty? Does it empower my purpose or does it drain me? Does it support my free will or try to dominate me? Does it uplift me or does it bind me? And does it guide me or does it consume me? Because divine guidance brings peace, strength, clarity, and internal confirmation. Dark influence brings confusion, depletion, fear, obsession, or dependency. Guard your devotion, guard your attention, and guard your spiritual seat. Not everything calling your name deserves your reverence. Some forces are only seeking survival, and they want to survive through you. Spiritual worship is spiritual currency. It is the highest form of spiritual recognition. When you worship something, you elevate it. You center it. You give it credit. You allow it to access. You give it access to your inner realm. Dark forces understand something most people overlook. They cannot create power. They can only harvest it. They are not original. They are parasitic. They don't know how to build a future. They don't know how to sustain themselves. They don't know how to manifest light. They only know how to steal. This is why the enemy obsesses over your elevation. He cannot create a kingdom, but if he can get you to bow to him, he can feed off yours because he knows you belong to one. That's why dark forces don't ask for you to understand them. They ask you to focus on them. I recall, of course, I would never give a name, but there were a spiritual group, and a young lady, she had a question. And when she asked that question, she was told, you don't need to ask me any questions. Just do as I say. That was enough for me. I learned. I made enough mistakes in my life, but let me keep going. See, they want attention, fear, devotion, agreement, and obedience. Why? Because attention becomes an offering, and fear becomes a doorway. Obsession becomes sustenance, and devotion becomes a binding. This is why a lot of people who believe they are watching, studying, or just learning end up drained, lost, or spiritually disoriented. They didn't realize they were feeding something. The enemy doesn't require belief. He could care whether or not you believe in him, but he requires your investment. And once you invest, he gains permission. Dark forces chase commitment because they cannot stand independently. Divine power moves with or without applause. Divine power does not need validation, and divine power does not collapse when they are ignored. But darkness collapses without a host. Every dark force that demands worship is revealing its weakness. Some forces require fear-based devotion. Some require emotional entanglement. Some require submission disguised as loyalty, and some require praise disguised as honor. But the pattern is always the same: keep feeding me or I'll fall apart. It's not strength, it's dependency. I heard a prophet once say, you guys are to focus on me, on what my call is. You are to put your call and your purpose to the side and follow the man of God. And this is why the enemy hates independent thinkers. This is why he hates people who ask questions. This is why he hates people with inner strength. This is why he hates those who walk with God, because they don't need him. They don't need him or his sanctuary. The enemy knows he is nothing without someone to draw from. So he stalks the spiritually gifted, the spiritually sensitive, and the chosen, the ones with a calling, the ones with light, the ones with purpose. He is attracted to your weakness to serve another man or woman you believe is of God. He is attracted to your power. And the demand for devotion is him admitting, I cannot sustain myself without you. Most openings are emotional and they're not ceremonial. Dark energies rarely introduce themselves by force. They enter when the heart is vulnerable. So they look for empty places, wounded places, lonely, desperate, confused places, curious places, and unprotected places. Be careful what you become curious about, because devotion doesn't always look like worship. Sometimes it looks like overthinking, feeling tied to someone you know isn't good for you, needing someone's approval, feeling connected to someone who drains you, obsessing over someone's opinion, feeling compelled to please someone, fear that keeps replaying in your mind, a relationship you can't seem to walk away from, a presence you feel when no one is near, and a guilt someone uses to control you. They are not random, these are hooks. Hooks are designed to create emotional devotion, and emotional devotion eventually turns into spiritual devotion. Once a force secures emotional access, it begins to feed. Your fear becomes nourishment, your worry becomes a sacrifice, and your obsession becomes an altar. And that's how demonic contracts are formed, not always through ritual, but through repeated emotional agreement. Dark patterns show up in people, relationships, institutions, communities, spiritual groups, leaders, partners, mentors, families, friendships, and authorities. Every entity, spiritual or human, that demands devotion ends up behaving the same. They want your loyalty, not your growth. They want your attention, not your purpose. They want your obedience, but not you reaching your destiny. You will notice these behaviors. They punish distance. They shame independence. They call separation disloyal. They use guilt as control. They require constant affirmation. They drain those attached to them. They create drama and chaos when they lose influence. And they use fear to keep you near. They destroy your self-esteem so they can come back and save you. They weaponize your vulnerability and they turn others against you. And they place themselves above your calling. This is not just emotional abuse. This is spiritual mimicry. They imitate the enemy, demanding devotion because they cannot maintain their power any other way. They are suffering with low self-esteem. Some people don't want companionship. They want ownership. Some leaders don't want followers. They want control. And some leaders don't want love. They want dependency. It's all the same spirit, wearing different faces. When you give devotion to something not meant to receive it, your vision, your spirit, and your direction blurs. Your identity distorts because devotion gives seats of authority. Whatever you elevate begins to influence you. So if you elevate fear, fear will direct you. If you elevate a partner, they overshadow your purpose. You elevate a leader, they become your moral compass. If you elevate a movement, it becomes your worldview. And if you elevate a person's opinion, it becomes your measure of worth. Dark influence always produces the same symptoms. And the list is long, but here's a few: fatigue, confusion, drama and chaos, insecurity, procrastination, spiritual stagnation, abnormal connection to someone, inability to think clearly, loss of joy and purpose, feeling off or unlike yourself, recurring negativity, anxiety you can't explain, and dreams that feel invasive. And the list goes on. These are indicators that devotion has been misdirected. When you serve something that does not come from the divine, you begin to diminish because you are pouring into something that only takes and never gives. Guarding yourself is not about paranoia, it's about awareness. Here's the truth: anything that demands worship will eventually destroy you. Anything that demands reverence will eventually drain you. Anything that demands devotion will eventually consume you. So, how do you protect yourself? By learning to listen to your spirit above all else. Spiritual protection begins with spiritual honesty. You cannot guard yourself from what you refuse to name. But when you recognize something that feeds on your attention, drains your strength, or pressures you, to give more than you receive, then you can cleanse, separate, cut off, withdraw, and reclaim your authority. Guard your devotion, guard your reverence and your inner realm, because not every force is seeking to elevate you. Some are seeking to survive through you. Thank you for visiting my channel. Stay covered, stay conscious, and stay undefeated. I'll see you on the next one.